Howdy, folks. Welcome back or welcome aboard. You are listening to the Doc Owen Show, and we are extremely glad to have you. I think we've got another good show for you tonight. We may be about 7 to 8 minutes short on material, but we'll see what we can do to kind of stretch it out and make it interesting. I'll get a little help because I'm joined in the studio tonight by...
I'm a Surefire.
And...
Uncle Bachi.
Full house, ready to go, rock and roll. We are all over the social media as Doc Owen Show, DocWenshow. Reach out to us on Facebook. We've got a blog, docowenshow.com. I am a real fan of Twitter, shooting for 10,000 followers. So we're like 5,070 or something like that. So every one of you need to get a friend. That's all you need to do is have one of your myriad followers follow us. And if each one of you can just get one to listen to Doc Owen Show and get involved with delivering truth to youth, we'll be at 10K by daybreak tomorrow. So let her rip. Let's get her going. We also have a free app called, wait for it, Doc Owen Show.
Wow.
Do you know how much money we invested in that, branding thing?
Yes, branding is very important. That's
I
true.
agree. Mm-hmm. We're on Apple and we're on Android. Go to your respective store, download the free app. You will have instantaneous access to the show as well as our entire podcast library at your disposal. And there are some good interviews. There is some good stuff out there that we like to think is extremely informative. That's the intent. We start our show after those little words of wisdom and self-advertising, which is the only advertising you'll hear until the next program because it won't be on ours. But we start the show in a traditional manner. We get an inspirational note from Ms. Surefire. Uncle Bachi tells us something about what happened this day in history because he just absolutely refuses to live in the present world. And
That's
then,
right. It's too hard to live in the present world.
It's just too hard on you.
It's mentally frustrating.
Tell me about it.
Must be nice. And then I'll follow up with something having to do with leadership, and we will dive into the show. So, Ms. Surefire, take it away.
And tonight's quote comes from brainyquote.com. I've been getting quite a few quotes from them lately.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is www.brainy, B as in boy, RAINY, quote.com. And tonight's quote comes from a lady that most of us should remember. Her name was Dr. Joyce Brothers.
Oh, yes.
She was
I still have her response to my letter.
There you go.
Okay.
She was an American psychologist, television personality, and columnist, as doctors shared on
Yeah,
that.
but the response was a little tardy.
Oh.
I wound up marrying my second wife anyway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's another story.
I agree.
That's
Go
true.
on with your inspiration.
Okay. So, tonight's quote is, well, maybe it kind of falls into what you were just saying. Trust your hunches.
Ooh. Ouch.
They're usually based on facts filed away just below the conscious level.
Mm-hmm.
That's your psychology coming out right
Yeah.
there. Mm-hmm.
Is that it?
That's it.
I think
That's
that's
awesome.
Yeah, the name of that site should be called Brainy Ouch.
Brainy ouch.
Because that's an ouch type of quote. Good job. Thank you, Ms. Surefire.
You're welcome.
Bachi?
Yes, sir.
What's of note in our historical past?
Well, there were two things. One of them fits right into where we are in our historic series.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. On this day in 1776,
Ooh.
wow, a gentleman by the name of Edward Rutledge, who was a delegate from South Carolina, he actually made news by saying he opposes independence. Now, the thing is important. He and John Jay were of the same mind. So what this means is that understand that all the people in the colonies were not gung-ho about this idea of independence. And we'll talk more about that. But they weren't all gung-ho. So there were those who wanted to stay with the Brits. And then also in 1972, there was a major Supreme Court decision on this day where the Supreme Court actually struck down the death penalty. Okay?
What year?
In 1972. They made that decision based on the fact that they did not like the way the states were handling it. And, you know, some of them were doing very
Cruel,
bad
unusual
things.
punishment.
Right, cruel.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was.
That was the argument, right.
That was their argument.
72, I was like old enough to remember.
I was 5.
Good to say, though,
You know,
4 years later,
Yeah.
the Supreme Court ruled it was okay once the states got themselves straightened out
Right, as to how to do it.
Yeah.
Right. You know, the guys, Rutledge and John Jay, and you said they were of like minds?
Yes.
That's why people said neither one of them had a half a brain.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. John is...
You didn't say they shared a mind. Oh, okay. Our leadership quote for tonight comes from my friends at the Optimist Club and their little book on optimistic quotes for achieving the extraordinary. And it's from Diana Scharf Hunt. And that's Scharf. And Emma's nodding her head like I have. Who is that? You've heard of her?
I've heard the name Scharf, but
Okay.
I can't remember what. Maybe in the jewelry industry or
Okay.
something. Yeah.
Okay. I like to quote, goals are dreams with a deadline.
Like project management.
Just like project management.
I like it.
Near
I
and
like
dear
it.
to us.
Yeah.
Goals are dreams with a deadline.
I like that.
Okay.
Good.
Tonight's, I just thought I'd give you a little overview of tonight's show in case you are not on the Doc Owen Show Insider email list, which you can sign up for at docowenshow.com. And by doing that, you will find out when we have a special guest on. That's about the only time we send out an email reminding you, our friends of the show, is when we have somebody special on. We're going to have a conversation with Bexar County District Attorney Nico Lahood about sanctuary cities and illegal immigration and all things kind of wrapped in with it. I think you'll enjoy it. I know we enjoyed having the conversation. And then, you know, that's really going to, those topics are really going to kind of take up the show. There's a couple of other interesting things in the news that we will talk about. It will not have to do with our current president, Donald J. Trump, but I am reminded to help you say the president of the United States is Donald J.
Trump.
Boom. We need a band.
Ba-da-boom.
Or at least a sound effect or something. Okay, so without getting too tangled up, we will start with what we call Uncle Bocce's Brief, which is somewhere from 7 to 10 minutes of a history lesson. We are still in the United States before it became the United States, right?
That's right.
I mean, we're dealing with what our forefathers had to deal with in terms of the tyrannical government coming out of England and how much they put up with and what they did about it. Uncle Bocce, are you ready?
I am ready.
You got anything to say?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Tonight we're going to talk about the Second Continental Congress, which was actually the third time that all the colonies got together for a reason.
Why you do that right at the beginning? The Second Continental Congress,
Yes.
which is the third time.
Which is the third time that the colonies, there was the Stamp Act Congress.
So they got together once and decided to have a continent. The first time was a meeting to discuss what the meeting was going to be about.
Kind of, but
and they decided that's what the first meeting was, and then the second meeting was the first Continental Congress.
Correct.
And the third meeting was the second. Okay,
That's
I think I
correct.
see the corporate picture. Go for
Okay,
it.
good. So by this time, a rough draft of the Declaration of Independence was handwritten by Thomas Jefferson. Now, don't get misled here. The Declaration of Independence was really written by a lot of people.
Right.
But it was Thomas Jefferson who put it together.
Well, somebody's got to do the
Yeah,
editing.
exactly,
the
exactly.
proper English and grammar and all
Yeah,
that jazz.
and Thomas Jefferson was the most educated of our founders.
So we've heard.
Yeah. So it was believed that it was copied from several creative drafts. Not only that, but there were other local declarations of independence, if you want to say. The different colonies had their own. So there was a lot of precedent for that. The changes made from draft to final form help us understand more precisely the meanings the Declaration Committee intended. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to get real heavy into that.
Well, now, okay, so did they, at the same time, were they publishing the Federalist Papers? Were they publishing?
No.
That didn't come about.
No.
We don't have that yet, right?
Right.
That
That
had to do
came
with
about.
the Constitution.
That had, right.
Explaining
exactly.
the Constitution to the public. Okay.
Exactly.
Just wanted to I just need to know. Mm-hmm. Okay, Coach.
Now, times had taken a sharp turn for the worse. Lexington and Concord had changed everything. The Redcoats came into Boston, a crowd, and they shot dead a few people as the Boston Massacre. Now, professional Imperial Army was attempting to arrest Patriot leaders, and Minutemen had been killed in their defense. So this was going back, armed conflict was going back and forth. Now, in May of 1775, with Redcoats, as they were called,
Right.
once again storming Boston, the Second Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia. The questions were different this time. First and foremost, how would the colonists meet the military threat of Britain? A very logical question there.
But
Well-
we were already having armed.
We were always
conflict.
having armed conflict. It was mostly militia, local militia kind of things.
Okay.
Okay.
Like guerrilla
So-
warfare. In other
Yeah.
words, it wasn't a.
Wasn't an organized
It didn't appear to be a well organized
army. That's correct.
on either side.
That's correct.
Okay.
So what they agreed to was that they would set up a continental army. Wouldn't you? Makes sense, right?
Sure.
Okay. So then the Congress commissioned, guess who?
Okay. The choices are so large.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Washington.
George Washington.
All right.
So they commissioned him, and he was from Virginia, to be the supreme commander who chose to serve without pay. Don't doubt George Washington's patriotism. He was willing to do this without any pay. Of course, he was wealthy, but
Got that going
that's
on
besides
right?
the point.
Don't we have that going on right now?
I don't know. Does Trump? I don't know. I remember he said he wasn't going to take a pay. So there you go. I mean, he's already mimicking George Washington. Good for him. Next question was, how would supplies be paid for? Well, the only way you can do that is with money.
Right.
So they decided they would print money.
Okay.
Okay. Which is either a good or bad thing. I don't know. Before the leaves had turned, Congress had given an appointed standing committee to conduct relations with foreign governments.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
That should the need ever arise. And it was a full-fledged, no longer Congress dealing with mere grievances. It was now a full-fledged governing body. Okay?
Okay.
Still, in May of 1775.
But not. It was a full-fledged governing body,
Yes.
but not a central government. It wasn't a
Right.
United States.
Right.
Okay.
That's absolutely correct.
So
It's
it was
not.
the states getting together.
The colonies more
The colonies
specifically.
I
Yeah.
like it. Yep, good correction. And they created a Congress. So basically, it was a bunch of representatives representing the voice of each one
Each
of the colonies.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
However, still in May of 1775, the majority of delegates were not seeking independence from Britain. It's important to remember that. Only radicals like John Adams, and we've talked about him before, were in this mindset of, liberty from Great Britain.
Okay.
In fact, that July 1775, Congress approved what was called the Olive Branch Petition, which was a direct appeal to King George. Please, let's try to reconcile this so that we don't go to blows.
Right.
Well, the king, of course, he didn't even want to see it. He refused to even look at it. So the American delegates that were pleading with him, they just didn't get what they wanted. The king refused, to even receive it, and he went further than that. He declared the colonies to be in a state of rebellion in the month of August.
He was right.
And he was right. He was right. They were in a state of rebellion.
We can't fault the guy for that.
Right. From his perspective, it was a bad thing, but from our perspective, it was a good thing.
Yeah, but think about where he's coming from. He nailed it.
Yeah, he did. He really did. Insult turned to injury when George III ordered the hiring of Hessian mercenaries to bring the colonists under control.
Hessian being German?
The German.
That's what I thought.
The mercenaries.
Just say it, man, the Germans.
Yeah. Okay. Americans now felt less and less like their English brethren, because up to this point they really felt that they were British. They were English.
Well,
they were subject to every right that British, but the Brits didn't go for it.
Right.
How could their fellow citizens order a band of ruthless foreign goons? So they were still in that mindset that they were part of Great Britain. The moderate voice in
they
continental...
didn't even show us the respect to fighting us themselves.
Yeah, well... Okay. The moderate voice that was in the Continental Congress was dealt a real blow.
Right.
By this time. Of course, what would you expect? And then as the seasons changed and hostilities continued, cries for independence grew stronger.
Right.
Well, what do you expect, right?
Right.
The men in Philadelphia were now wanted for
treason. How did I know that was coming?
Yes.
Okay.
They were wanted for treason.
Right.
Okay. So they did put their lives on the line. They continued to govern and hope against hope that all would end well. Well,
you can't. I get it.
8 years down the road, probably, yes, you can say that it did end well, but not during. For them, the summer of 1776 brought the point of no return and a formal declaration of independence.
Boom.
And we will be getting into that in a couple of weeks. Next week, we're going to take a look at Common Sense by Thomas Paine.
Yep.
We're going to take a look at that because that was so important and key to the military effort that we were under.
Yeah.
So, my name and how you can reach me is Uncle Bachi. That's UNCLEBACI at DocOwenShow.com.
Well done, lad.
That's where I be.
Well done.
Thank you, Uncle Bachi.
And we are making some progress on Uncle Bachi's page within DocOwenShow.com. And
yes.
So what we're going to be doing out there, what Uncle Bachi's going to be doing, is publishing links to some of his research.
Exactly.
So although we've got Uncle Bachi's brief here, if something strikes a chord or you'd like to know more about it, then you can go out there, grab that link, and read all the articles that Uncle Bachi reads to get prepared for the show. So
there you go.
If you're even if you're not a history buff, you should do this. This is we're not talking just general history. We're talking about how we became the United States of America. And it's very important that we all understand that and respect that history.
Exactly.
Not just July the 4th. Speaking of that, before we go on to the rest of the show.
Yes, sir.
Well, Uncle Bachi was pointing. We were talking about this next week being July the 4th, and it's next Tuesday. And so, as I was putting together the show board that we use, I asked a question. What's the big deal? I mean, it's Tuesday. It's a holiday, right? And so I was informed that it was. Go ahead, Bachi. Start the conversation.
Yeah, July 4th,
right,
in 1776 was the month that they declared their independence and sent the letter off to. However, there is some dispute about that.
Right.
Because some of the signers
Yeah.
were not there and could not have been a signature on there.
Right.
They came a little bit later. So there is some dispute about it, but that's besides the
Yeah,
point.
but I answered that question for
Yeah.
you. They were the ones, even though it's a holiday, they were the ones that had to work that day.
That's
so
right.
They had to come by on a weekend day and sign the letter.
Exactly.
So I mean that's perfectly explainable why they weren't there. Cause
Sure,
They
sure.
it was a holiday. They couldn't
Yeah.
get there. Okay. So since we cleared that up, we are now you're going to have the privilege and enjoyment of listening to a conversation that we had earlier in the week with Nico Lahood. The background of I won't go into the background. It is about sanctuary cities. It is a very hot topic in the nationwide and extremely hot in the state of Texas. And also, some decisions are being made about the legality of a bill that was recently passed outlawing them in Texas, right here in San Antonio, Texas. And so we'll get into all of those things, and Nico and I will have a conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the movie. We'll let her rip. Nico.
Yes, sir, Doc.
Big picture, sanctuary cities in the news.
Yep.
Started. We'll get to this. The Honorable Judge Garcia. That is, I don't know whether they've decided yet or not, but it's probably still ongoing.
Right.
You know. But let's back it up a little bit. They passed in Texas. They passed Senate Bill number 4. Which outlawed across the state. I'm kind of doing this for the listeners. I know you know.
Sure. No, it's good. I'm always willing to learn something.
But it's also for you to say, no, Doc, you're wrong.
Right.
Which happens. He doesn't really say it, folks. He just sort of gives me the look, of the DA look.
The Nico look.
But they passed Senate Bill 4 at the state, and the governor signed off on it, and basically it banned sanctuary cities in the state of Texas. Well, all of our major metropolitan areas, including San Antonio, said, no, we're not going to do that. It doesn't go into effect until September the 1st. So they pushed back and apparently filed, I know that they did, they filed like a joint lawsuit. They all got together, a couple of smaller cities weighed in. And then, I don't understand why, Bexar County, our home county here, that surrounds San Antonio, also got in on the lawsuit.
Right.
I read in one report that you had advised, because that now we're in your responsibility.
Correct.
City of San Antonio is not, but Bexar County is.
Right.
And so I got the opportunity to explain to some of the listeners straight up about what the difference is and where you know, because you've explained it to us. And you advised him to wait 30 days. If at least that's what I read in the paper.
Correct.
You didn't tell me that, so I wanted to make
You
sure
didn't read
it's
it in the paper.
correct. Where did I read it? Where did I read it?
Probably heard
Online?
it somewhere. You might have read it online. I don't talk to the paper usually, but
I read it somewhere.
I did say things. I did say that. My advice was to wait 30 days.
Your advice was to
Maybe
wait
you read
30
the
days.
paper, I don't know.
No, because I don't read the paper.
No.
So I don't.
Yeah.
You told me I couldn't. No. But so the county commissioners said, thank you for your advice.
Sure.
But we're going to do this anyway.
Right.
Explain, and I don't know, I mean, what are they doing? Are they saying that it's unconstitutional? Right. Are they questioning the legitimacy of the law that was passed?
See, a lot of people are against Senate Bill 4, but for different reasons.
Okay.
I don't support Senate Bill 4, but for very different reasons than other people, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
I do not support sanctuary cities. I do not.
I know you
You and I have spoken about that.
Yeah,
okay?
at length, yeah.
I mean, and everyone has a different definition of what that means.
Yeah.
Senate Bill 4 does not ban sanctuary cities. It tells different agencies and municipalities that you cannot have a policy that forbids someone to ask about their immigration status.
Right.
So people are
they're trying to force the cooperation with ICE.
It's not. I don't know if it's forcing it. They're just tying the hands of municipalities, counties, cities, more importantly, law enforcement agencies.
Yeah.
And the law says you can't have a policy that says that bans your officers or deputies from asking about immigration.
Okay.
SAPD had a policy.
I know. Oh, we talked to them about it.
That said you cannot ask
can't
about
do it.
immigration.
Right. Right.
So this says you can't have that. Now, it doesn't say you have to ask about immigration. It just says you can't ban them from asking about immigration.
Okay.
But then it gets real slippery. Here's the deal. I understand the spirit. This is where I'm getting to my opinion now.
Yes, sir.
I understand the spirit of what the governor was trying to do.
Right.
And I appreciate it.
Right.
I appreciate him signing that bill, and I haven't read it yet, that says that you can't follow any other law but the Constitution. And he's referring to Sharia law.
Which,
and you know
which
how
we've also talked about.
You and I, you know how I feel about Sharia law.
Yes,
I'm not
sir.
a supporter. I speak out against it. I think it's horrible and evil.
It's
And so
unconstitutional.
it is what it is.
It's
It is
against our way of life.
But I
period.
think it's great that there's. So I support the governor in that sense. I mean, I'm
Sure.
one of his biggest advocates because I speak out on this all
Right.
the time. But what he's trying to accomplish in the spirit of this law is not going to be accomplished. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. Let's see. I'm a practical man, so let's play this out.
Yes.
So I pull you over. Hey, Doc, let me see your driver's license. Boom, boom, boom. Owens, look you up. Are you a citizen? I am. I don't believe you. Now what? No, nobody carries their passport.
Right.
No, not you, not me.
No.
My wife was born in California, raised in Mexico, so she's got dual citizenship. I mean, she has an accent. I mean, so people have the
And we
argument.
vociferously repel against it, carrying your passport. I mean, that's one of the things that
What did you just say? Vociferously?
yeah,
Okay.
loudly.
That's okay. You gotta work with me. But so my point is, from a practical standpoint, what does that law enforcement officer do? He holds you there, gets on the phone with ICE, and ICE says, "I'll be there within any time between 30 minutes to 2 hours."
Right.
Homeland Security, call those folks. They tell you the same thing. There's not a computer data where you say Doc Owens and type it in there, and then it comes back like you have a warrant out of the 227th or for a traffic violation,
Right.
and then I can make a decision right there.
Boom.
It doesn't work that way. So it's not practical in its application. That's my issue with it.
Okay.
I respect the spirit of it.
Yeah.
It's not practical. Now, from law enforcement, which I agree with the chief and the sheriff and a lot of chiefs, it creates this environment of paranoia that everyone's going to be taken out of our community. Now,
Yeah.
that sounds great until we need witnesses to prove cases against people that are guilty of crimes.
Correct.
I mean, if someone's abusing an illegal immigrant or someone who's not illegally, I want to hold them accountable still, because what they can do to that person, they can do to someone who's an American citizen too.
Right.
I want to hold people accountable for violating the penal code of the state of Texas, period, end of story. And so anything that's going to hinder me by either scaring our witnesses, creating a division between law enforcement, which is our front line of our prosecutions, they turn the case over to us, and the community in certain sectors, is an issue for me. And I don't want to unintentionally create more victims, another class of victims, because we've already seen some discussions, people that are abusers, they abuse you mentally, not just physically. And they'll say, hey, I'm going to call immigration on you if you call the police. We're already seeing that type of misinformation being sent out to victims.
And one of the reasons that I think they're using that intimidation, as you say, think it all the way through. If these folks have any background or any knowledge or any experience with the federales, with the Mexican police, which we're the closest to, they don't trust.
Sure.
Our police are completely different in the way that we communicate with our communities.
Community, right.
And how you and I grew up.
Right.
I mean, they were our friends. They were
Right.
there to protect us.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the case on the other side of the border.
And perception is
so-
reality to folks.
Right.
So I guess my point one, because see how we already mixed a couple of issues in together, because
Yeah.
it's ebb and flow.
Oh, it's tough.
It works together.
It's
so number
tough.
one, it's not practical. I mean, it's just not practical.
I'm not sure I agree with you about the. There is a type of, and I've forgotten the number of it. My bad.
Okay.
But we talked about it once before. A type of a visa that these guys have at their disposal. I think it's in the teens. It's a 17 or a 14 or something like that.
18?
Maybe.
For what? When you're a witness?
When you're a witness,
Correct.
that you can get a correct,
Yes.
a temporary visa that really kind of gives you and your family, if you come forward and testify.
How do you communicate that to them? Theory is wonderful. I'm into application.
I know.
Right. See, and so that's why.
But where's your feedback on why doesn't this thing work? Because
Right.
I researched it and read about
Right.
it, and I said something to the chief about it one time, and
but again,
you didn't take too
my
loudly
deal
to
is
that.
so you're putting a restriction on local law enforcement, and you're telling local law enforcement leaders and counties and city leaders how to run their municipality and counties. I have an issue with it. I'm a conservative guy. You know that.
Oh, yeah.
I believe in small government.
Yes,
I don't
sir.
believe in big government.
No, I know.
And with all due respect to the governor, how many times has he flipped off the federal government?
Right, a lot.
By saying, "Hey, screw you! Don't tell us how to run
Actually,
Texas."
a lot, right?
And I respect him for it.
And we like him for that.
How about that? I respect him for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so good for him.
Yeah.
I respect him and I support him.
He's doing what he was elected to do, take care of us.
And I'm fine with that.
Right.
But then to me, with all due respect, I think it's a little bit hypocritical. Now he's playing big government and telling us how to run our municipalities and counties and agencies. That's not consistent for me.
I got
in my analysis.
No, I see what. Yeah.
And so, to me, this is me, and I'm going to say it. You know me. I'm going to say it the way it is.
Yeah.
This is all a political pissing contest.
That's exactly what it is.
Look, the sheriff from Travis County screwed up. She got super political. She flipped the bird at the governor. The governor said, "Oh yeah, well, I'm gonna flip the bird at you." Cut off funding with her.
They made
But they took it to another level. Remember, SB4. The research that I've done, and I could be wrong, so I'm going to put that caveat here. It really.
But I'll add another caveat, folks. It's doubtful.
I'm just saying, it started off just addressing the 48-hour detainer. Remember, that's how this political pissing contest started.
Yeah.
The Travis County Sheriff said, we're not going to honor 48-hour detainers.
I remember.
And then the governor said, why not? We're not going to do it. Because it was an option. That's the way the law is written. We've done it in Bexar County for decades.
I know.
I told the new sheriff, the county, I said, guys, we've honored this for decades. This is nothing new for us. That's just business as usual.
Business as usual.
Why wouldn't you?
And it's been working.
And it's been fine. 48 hours is not unreasonable. It's reasonable, right, in my opinion.
Right.
So she said no. He said yes. They got into this pissing contest. So now it went into the Senate a certain way. It came out in the House something
Both
very
of them
different.
bowed up. They just...
And I get it. Look, here's what I think
Power
should happen,
struggle.
in my humble opinion. And I'm entitled to it.
Yes, sure.
Just like what the federal government does to states.
Yeah.
Different states in the past, this is how it worked out, said, no, federal government, we don't want our DWI laws a .08. We want to keep it a .10. And the Fed government goes, that's fine, state. You can do that, but guess what I'm not going to give you is funding for your roads and highways. Guess what the states do? Fine. We'll make it a .08. That's how that should work. You don't create a law that is big government. It tells smaller government, but should have the autonomy to run government the way.
You and I are on that same side. I mean,
how I feel.
Yes, sir.
I mean,
and now it never dawned on me that
it gets better,
Texas doing that to you guys.
Isn't it ironic though, a little bit?
Yeah.
And again, and I know it's out of emotion.
Yeah.
I know the governor doesn't think that way in his spirit. That's not his mindset.
No, he's doing it for you. I mean,
he thinks
he thinks he's helping.
But it's not working out that way, and he didn't want to listen to all the different chiefs and people. And that's and here's the second
Chiefs
issue.
really presented their argument poorly.
Maybe
to
they
be
did.
quite honest.
I don't know.
Well, they kept putting it off to their union. They kept putting it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Every
time you get McManus out in public, and I'm sure the other chiefs around the state were the same way. They all put it off to the national union, and the national union has decided this and decided it, and that was a mistake.
Well, and you know more about that than I do. I just believe in speaking about practical facts.
I understand.
And so that's an issue. And then here's the second issue. I have a real big problem when you create this overreaching law that's not practical. Remember, let's not forget that it's not practical. It's never going to play out.
It can't work.
It doesn't play out. What do? You wait 2 hours, and then guess what that officer's not doing? Responding to the domestic violence. And you say that might be fine until it's your daughter being beat, or your wife, or your sister, or your cousin, or ag assault, sexual assault, murder, burglary of a habitation. It might be your house. Hey, we're the cops. They're on the side of the road waiting for ice that's not going to come for 2 hours. I mean, it's just not practical to me. That's number one. Number two, then the remedy or the penalty is to potentially remove elected officials from office. That's insane to me. Now you're taking away the power of the vote.
We talked about that. We talked about the position it was putting you in, because you'd have been the enforcement guy, right? I mean, the DA would have to enforce, and it was removal from office. It was a large fine. For
but think about this.
employees.
But think about this. Let's say that ICE, and they did this twice, wants to come into our courthouse and start looking for people. which happened twice, by the way. We have that already, and we're actually victims walked out and left us because they saw them in the courtrooms and waiting outside.
Yeah.
It only happened twice. So guess who's going to speak out against that?
Sure.
Yours truly.
Sure.
So now, do I violate the law and I'm subject to being removal? They're going to have a fight on their hands. I promise you that. I'm not going to sit back from anybody when I'm standing on truth. So I can't have an opinion when I want to make sure that someone's being held accountable for a violation of the penal code and breaking laws in Bexar County, which I was elected and entrusted to do.
Right.
Shit, it'll be a cold day. Sorry, you're going to bleep that out.
It's all good.
It'll be a cold day in hell before that happens with me around and me be quiet about it and run away nicely.
Right.
So I have an issue with that. I should have an opinion and be able to voice it. Remember, any policy that says you're restricting enforcement of these things, can it be interpreted that way? We have no case law on this. So we have a vague issue. We have a First Amendment issue that you can't speak your mind as an elected official because then you might be construed as being against this law. Then you can be removed potentially, and then a municipality can be fined. I mean, do you see where? I'm just getting started.
Oh, I know. I know. I talked about it and I knew it'd be a hot button because it's current, and you've been having to deal with it.
Right.
And so, when I talked about it earlier, when it first started unfolding, it forced me to do some homework. It forced, there was another thing. That, for instance, you brought up the detainer. There was a recent incident here that Sheriff Salazar did not honor the detainer. Or no, that's not true.
He did.
Yes.
He did honor the detainer.
And Garcia, the judge, who's now hearing the case, he came out and unplugged it basically, and said
he said it was a violation of the Constitution because even though it was a clerical error, why he was held so long, he didn't even consider that. He just said by default the detainer itself is not independent probable cause. What he said is you need independent probable cause to hold somebody, which is not hard to get, by the way. But still, he said you need independent probable cause. The detainer itself is not it.
And it caused, and what bothered me the most about it, and you'll get a kick out of this, I hope, was the fact that we're talking about an illegal immigrant
potentially.
Okay.
Because remember, there's two types of status. There's two types of detainers. One of them says, we don't know this person's status. We still need to have a hearing to determine it.
Okay.
And then there's a second one that says he's being detained for illegal reentry.
Okay.
I had to learn that myself, by the way. I'm not trying to act like a know-it-all.
No, it's okay.
I had to educate myself on that.
We've all had to educate.
There's two types of detainers.
Okay. And let's put it this way. The accounts that I read referenced him as an illegal.
I got it.
Okay. So my immediate reaction was, well, what are we talking about? The guy's illegal, and we're giving him constitutional rights.
Right.
And so then I went out to the did some research and realized.
What'd you find out?
Ruh-roh.
Yep. What'd you find out?
I found out he has constitutional rights.
That's number one.
But because way back in like the 1850s sometime, one of our really wise guys, not the Italian wise guys,
yeah, I
but
got
the
you.
wise people.
Real wise guys.
Yeah, the real wise guys. Said, well, if we're going to make them obey our Constitution, we have to give them the
Which
the
makes
same
sense, right?
protect.
Does that make sense?
It made a lot of sense,
Sure.
but my immediate reaction was probably the same as a large part of the people.
Right.
You got a judge named Garcia. You got a guy who's being put out there as an illegal, and we're giving him constitutional rights. And she'll tell you, my immediate reaction that morning when I read it was,
But when you think about the men and the women, or what was the men back
but
then,
I did a Lahood and I did my homework.
did you? What you need to, right? Wisdom
Yes, sir.
is important, right?
And I brought it up on the radio. I didn't apologize, but I said,
Well,
I made sure that Uncle Bocce and Ima had the same reaction that I immediately had.
Well, but the thing
And
is,
I
that's
said,
the
no.
human reaction. But when you look deeper and you see when they constructed the Constitution, why it makes sense.
It does.
That hey, you're going to come into our country
it's-
either
and
way,
it's-
illegal or illegally. We're going to hold you to our laws and
We
Constitution.
prefer that you do it legally,
Right, but if you break the laws, you're going to be held accountable. So why wouldn't you get protections? It goes both ways. That's number one. Here's number two. It is not against the law to be in this country illegally. That's going to jack you up.
Mr. Lahood.
It jacked me up. It's not against the law. It's a civil action. That's why if somebody comes in on their first if someone says, I'm going to the United States,
It's not
I
a
need
criminal.
to work.
When you say it's not against the law,
You're not violating the federal statutes. It's a civil action. You're removed, but it's not against the law. Let me give you a comparison. If I walk onto your property, I'm not guilty of criminal trespass automatically.
okay.
Why? it's going to be a law school exam. Why? I have to be given notice.
Okay.
You have to say, don't come in, or as I'm on your property, hey, Nico, get the hell off my property.
What if I got a sign up that says do not trespass?
For the state law, that's appropriate. It has to be conspicuous. It has to be, you have to get notice. The issue I'm trying to make is notice, right?
Yes, sir.
It's not inferred. I know it makes sense. Hey, come in right, but there's no notice inferred on them. So when they come in the first time, it's not a crime.
Okay.
It's a civil action that gets you removed now.
Now you've got notice.
Now you have notice,
Okay.
and so the charge is illegal re-entry into this country. That's a crime. Didn't that jack you up? I get it, but you see how there's so many dynamics here going on.
It does sort of, but at the same time,
It makes sense too.
You gotta go with it does make sense.
It makes sense. I'm sorry, brother.
I cut it off there. The second part will probably be next week. And the reason I took the break there is because that portion of the conversation really got me to thinking and being concerned that my friend might be wrong. Mm-hmm. But as he pointed out, I think in this part, if I remember correctly, I mean, one of Nico's favorite sayings is he tries not to react, but to respond. And so he tries not to react. He tries to do his homework and, gather his own facts and then respond to a situation. And I plan to do the same thing with Nico. So but one of the things that I did was that got me to thinking, do we have do not trespass, or do we have United States limit signs up and down the border so that we are giving notice that someone is crossing the border? I think the logical answer is probably not. Mm-hmm. In other words, we do have at the gates, we do have, within X number of feet or miles or whatever it is of the entry points. But up and down Texas, up and down that long border that we've got with Mexico, there's a lot of open space where someone technically could simply wander off track, and all of a sudden be in the United States, and they may not know it. Now, we all sort of chuckle and say, well, who are you kidding? But it could happen, and that's what the law is about, is protecting the fact that it could happen. Mm-hmm. So I took the Nico Lahood lead, and I reached out to a friend of the show that's been on the show that is with the Texas Border Volunteers, and they run a volunteer service that works with local peace officers, et cetera, to try to protect the Texas borders. And I asked him the question. I gave him the background that you just heard about notice and about exactly the conversation you just heard. And I asked him, do we have do not trespass signs up and down the border? And gave the explanation to him. Here's the response that I got. Here is one response that this gentleman got back from someone that would know, quote unquote. So I'm not really going into the fake news business. This is not an unnamed source. It's that I don't know who the source is, but my source does. All right. The DA is incorrect in his explanation of the violation. 8 U.S.C. 1325 is a criminal offense under that federal statute and is considered a misdemeanor because the term of confinement is only 6 months at the most and a fine or both. He is confusing civil trespassing law and regulations with a federal crime. This was the response that I got back. In addition, as I recall without doing research, criminal trespass is defined in different ways by different civil authorities. I think D.A. Lahood said that, and he's familiar with Texas, and, we were talking about Texas. So the definition he was giving me is what the courts support in the state of Texas. And he went on to say, I know for a fact because of how easily trespass signs can be taken down, it is considered notice to paint a tree or a fence post a specific color to indicate notice of property lines. All right? So I get to go another round with Nico to try to find. So that's caused me to think, and hopefully it'll cause you to think as well. Then it has to do with the state and or the federal government trying to require the state to do the work of ICE. You know, what they're saying is it's a federal crime, so a federal police force, I'm using air quotes, that would be the ICE police force, has to make the arrest, right? Mm-hmm. And Nico used the example of having to wait on ICE to come, you know, to actually make the arrest, that the officer there, even though he might have an illegal, he couldn't do anything about it. ICE would have to come pick them up and make the arrest, because we can't, local authorities cannot make an arrest on a federal crime,
Right.
which does make sense. Well, that's not true. It follows the letter of the law, you know, and so that's where we have a sticky wicket between the feds and the local police departments and the sheriff's department. And I still think that the locals are hiding behind nonsensical ideological lines when, in fact, this is really the case. They cannot. They don't have the authority to make an arrest on a federal crime, apparently. Like that I can buy. And why they don't tell us that, I don't know. But, or why they don't fix the law, fix the statute that says, and this can be enforced by local authorities. Give them permission to do it, if not a requirement or a charter. You're about to say something, Uncle Bussy.
Yeah, because when he was saying that, a question popped up into my mind, was he was trying to compare the federal government coming out and saying the states can't or cannot do what they do, that he was offended by the fact that the feds can come to the state and say that. Well, if you're set up federalism, and according to the Constitution, you see, according to the Constitution,
go ahead.
The states have every right to implement anything that they want within the state borders. Because you see, the states under federalism, they are a laboratory of what works and what doesn't work.
Yep.
Okay? So
now you're thinking.
Yeah, well, exactly, because this makes me think. You make me think. So I just don't, you know.
You don't buy into it. I mean, I don't buy into it either. I mean, I don't buy into the fact that there's not a remedy built into our Constitution, built into our current laws.
State Constitution or federal?
Federal, both actually.
Yeah.
You know, because they've been built and they've been built together. And I'm, you know, all about the original intent of the Constitution, and things not enumerated in the Constitution are the rights of the state. So then Amma brought up the fact in an earlier conversation about I mean, you say it when you were talking about that.
Oh, the federal connection. Well, I believe that the federal things that they were talking about is because the federal government's responsibility to secure the borders.
Exactly.
So then it becomes a federal crime if the person illegally crosses into our country. Then.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And that is their job. But then is there not a, I don't want to call it a loophole, but is there not a statute? Is it not written somewhere that if they're not doing that, then the state has the right to take care of it themselves? Isn't that logical in our federalist form of government? That the feds are charged with it, but if you're not going to do it, then we're forced to do it ourselves. Is that's when the old DOJ under Obama came after some of the states, right? Because they were usurping the federal power, even though they weren't enforcing the federal power.
Well, even Ted Cruz too, you know, took control in Texas, and when the federal government wouldn't protect the border, didn't he do something of that nature?
I mean, they went after, you know, the states went after creating border security, et cetera, here in Texas, and we spent a lot of money on it because it wasn't getting done, and it's still not getting done.
Right.
I mean, it's a lot better than it used to be. Don't get me wrong.
It's a different ballgame now
huge.
in the valley.
We've been down to the valley, and there's places down there. It's like a ghost town.
Yep, there's a new man in charge.
You can definitely tell the difference.
Yeah.
Even at the Border Patrol checks.
And I was reading something the other day where applications for food stamps and welfare and all of that
Everything
kind of
is
stuff
going
is
down.
way down in terms of, so, we know that the illegal immigration is down. But I'm going to go back to Nico, and I'm going to try to square this up for our listeners. So, this is one of those stay tuned sort of deals.
Yeah.
And, because I want to get to the bottom of it. I mean, I'm as confused as everybody else. Mm-hmm. I'm trying not to be too emotional about it. I'm trying to be analytical about it so that I can respond rather than react. And the second half of the interview has to do with Judge Garcia and his initial orders and things like that, and the fight that's going on over the Senate bill in the courthouse, in the federal courthouse here in town. So it's a lot of fun. It's a very interesting situation.
It really is. And, I'm thinking about a question of if an illegal alien who has re-entered the United States,
Yes.
okay, under federal law, he's guilty of a crime at the federal level.
Well, no, wait.
No,
He
what?
was already guilty on the federal level. He was already guilty the first time he came in.
Okay.
That's what our source is saying.
Okay.
There's a statute that says no.
You're right. You're
Criminal
right.
first-time offense.
Okay.
But on a state level, apparently, or on some level that Nico is talking about, it's that re-entry that makes it criminal versus civil.
True, but my question is that if this person commits a crime like that guy in California did and killed, whose responsibility is that then? Is that the state, the local, or is that a federal responsibility to prosecute that guy? I mean, we may not know, but that's part of my confusion, something that I would like to, hey guys, you out there?
Okay. We got a little bit. Let me give you another thought-provoking situation. It seems that a restaurant, I won't advertise for them, has been fined $400,000.
Oh,
we
gosh.
got 2 minutes. By the U.S. Department of Justice for re-verifying the documentation of non-citizen employees. This is discriminatory according to the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. Okay? Mm-hmm. You cannot verify. It goes on to this. This is the most outlandish thing I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
And this is a holdover from the previous administration. But if you attempt to ask for a driver's license or verification of citizenship of an employee, let's say annually or, whatever, on a regular basis, you are being prejudicial against their being able to work there. And they fined the restaurant for trying to be upright, for trying to make America great again and only hire U.S. citizens. And they got fined $400,000 for that practice. Go figure.
Yeah, go figure.
And there far more. I had an article about Facebook censorship is removing 66,000 posts per week.
Wow.
Okay, and they're doing it in the name of hate speech. Hate speech is not so. If they don't like it, it's
Get
hate
me
speech.
started on hate speech.
Well, I was going to, but I didn't
But
have
yeah,
time.
no, you.
And this one got you started just at the mention of it. The former White House press secretaries are urging Trump administration to embargo the daily press briefings. Bocce doesn't agree with that. I don't really know enough about it to have an opinion one way or the other. I just think it's an interesting fight to watch.
Yes, it is.
Between the press and the Trump administration. And I think it's going to be an interesting challenge for both sides.
Yeah.
So,
constitutionally, there's nothing barring him from having to have
Right.
a press conference.
So we got, that's right.
Okay.
So we got July the 4th coming. Front row. Time to go. You have been listening to the Doc Owen Show. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. Now go out there this week and take care, pay attention, and God bless.
Bye-bye, folks. God bless.